The women fighting for reform today, Greta Thunberg, Chloe Naldret, Jenny Hermoso, are heirs to generations of women who've been on the front line demanding political and social change. Women have fought for fairness, to protect the land, secure affordable food and access to employment for the last 1,000 years. Yet often they're missing from our national history. When the elite enclosed thousands of acres for their own use, it was women who took advantage of their lack of legal status and broke through fences and dikes to defend the common land, trying to force the new landlords to preserve the livelihoods they relied on. The Peasants' Revolt of 1381 was a revolution for women, led by women. It's recorded in history as the Wat Tyler Rebellion, naming one man among the many women leaders. The women, Johanna Farrar, Joan Hampcock, Agnes Jenkin, Margaret Stafford, Julia Pouchet, and Matilda and Isabel Brembol, led the movement against the proposed tax on wives. If there ever was such a thing as women's work, it was the food riot. During the hungry years of the 17th and 18th centuries, up and down the country, women battled with farmers and merchants to keep produce local and for access to food at a fair price. In 1629, riots erupted at Maldon, Essex, over the profiteering of grain merchants who had bought up local grain for export. Anne Carter, who was later hanged, led the women onto the ships to fill their bonnets and aprons with rye. In 1766, there was a riot at Nottingham Market to prevent Lincolnshire merchants from taking hundreds of pounds of cheeses out of the country. A merchant mustered his own mounted troop to find the stolen cheeses at Castle Donington, 14 miles away, but in this case, the magistrates sided with the poor. The troop arrested suspect rioters and besieged the magistrate's house, but an uprising of women and children drove the merchant out of town. By the 19th century, some middle and upper class women joined with the poor to protest against the new poor laws and the workhouse system. In 1825, ladies founded the first women's anti-slavery organisation in Birmingham, boycotting sugar and raising money. In 1875, women workers led their first organised strike in West Yorkshire. A young married weaver, Anne Ellis of Skelsey Mill, was appointed by men and women weavers to organise the protest. Florence Nightingale, Elizabeth Wolstenholme and Josephine Butler established their own association, the Ladies' National Association for the Repeal of Contagious Diseases, the first politically focused campaign to be organised and led entirely by women. They were actively campaigning against the assault on prostitutes who were being arrested and imprisoned for catching sexually transmitted diseases. Josephine Butler toured Britain speaking of the sistership of women, and eventually the law was repealed in 1886. Some members of the Contagious Diseases Act Committee went on to become leaders of the suffrage societies, campaigning for women's right to vote. But not all women wanted the vote. Caroline Norton, the bereaved mother whose children were taken by their father, who almost single-handedly won changes to the law with the Custody Act of 1839, she never supported women's suffrage. Campaigners like Etta Lemon, whose extraordinary crusade won conservation controls on the trade in wild bird pelts and feathers, also founded the Women's National Anti-Suffrage League, campaigning against women having a vote in national elections. In World War II, protest was widespread against rationing, food shortages, and the hours that had to be wasted queuing for food by the women who already had the burden of war work, raising children and running a home, often as the sole head of the household, with a husband away fighting. Women complained bitterly when essential foodstuffs were rationed and argued against government rationing. The protest would intensify when the war ended, but rationing did not. In 1970, the lack of trade union support for women workers led to a mass uprising in clothing workers at Leeds, when women workers went around the factories calling on other women workers to support a strike. Reclaim the Night Marches started in 1978 as part of an international women's demonstration against the threat to women on the street. In 1981, women were back defending common land, this time at Greenham Common with a peace camp objecting to a US military base for nuclear missiles. Eventually succeeding in 1997 when Greenham Common was designated a public parkland, returning the common land to the people, as women have demanded since 1066.